years ago, when the only people who lived here were the Indians, and according to David Tate's journal, the fire was so thick around the marshland of the Tallassee River below the Tallassee Falls that if and when the fire were fighting and flew, the sky turned black. Game was so plentiful, there was no excuse for hunger. White men came to this area to settle, and with the white men came dreams. And after seeing the fertile lands and the river with its force, and the river rock, and the longleaf pine, the property almost for the taking, and human labor that could be bought cheaper than the mules and horses and oxen of that day. Having all the above ingredients, the dreams of these men grew stronger and stronger. Why not build a textile plant, a mill to use, manufacture products from cotton that was so easily grown in the area? People would buy the rope, the cloth, and all the other items that could be had from cotton. So they set out to harness the power that came from the river to use the materials such as rock and lumber to build the structures that would house the cotton mill. Teaching the laborers how to carve and chisel the stone, to move it and arrange it to form the first buildings must have been a monumental task. As you can imagine, building these buildings that you see without the help of the great earth movers, cranes, explosives, electrical tools, lights, motor-operated vehicles, computers, engineers, draftsmen, and all the many things we have at our fingertips today. They had none of these. There will be many things that you will not see. The many hours, days, weeks, and months of digging and measuring into the bedrock to make the caves and the cellars to house the water wheels and the tunnels to allow the water to rush in and escape when not needed. How to tame the forces of the river and make the water do the job. Who made the wheels? Who figured out the sizes and the structures of the machinery? After all, this is a new type of industry, starting out here on the banks of the Tallassee River. The cotton gin itself is a new device, just discovered and put into use in Prattville, Alabama, some 40 miles away. A lot of the simplest items, such as a nail, a bolt, or peg, were made on the spot when needed. Can you just imagine how it must have been? All the houses had to be nearby because of the lack of transportation. The meals were cooked on the mill site, the blacksmith shops, the sawmills, quarry workers, livery stables, loggers, rock masons, carpenters, draftsmen, and so much more to make up the workforce. According to historical records, drunkenness was always a problem and fights were frequent. A man was old before he was 50, and children went to work as soon as they were big enough, regardless of their age. But sooner or later, the mill and all the subsequent buildings were ready and operational. Along with this came the Civil War, and cloth became more important than ever. And along with the cotton mill, an arsenal and an armory was needed, a place to build rifles. Carville, and many other surrounding cemeteries. The local men rallied to the cause, a lot of them using weapons made here at home. The rifles made their way to battles in Tennessee, Mississippi, Georgia, Louisiana, and as far away as Virginia. With the making of the rifles, many stories, some true, some fiction, and some a mixture of both, came out of the mill and the armory that joined it. As we look at the arsenal, history tells us that this armory got an order for 1,000 rifles. The men got busy and started making the rifles here in this building you're looking at. The stocks were going to be made in Albany or Macon, Georgia, and shipped to the city of Tallassee. The stocks never arrived. The men's pay never arrived. The men were getting more and more frustrated and aggravated. There was a tavern on top of the hill above the mill. They enjoyed spending their time there grumbling about not being paid. History also records that monies did come, some monies came to these men. Then someone came up with the idea, why don't we make our own stocks? They started making their own stocks. Then there is a record of some of the stocks arriving in this area and being assembled to the rifles. News came that the federal troops were marching this way. The men had orders to pack up the rifles and deliver them to Georgia. We know that they packed them in beef tallow. We know they wrapped them in skins. That's where history quits recording. Some say they loaded them on wagons. These wagons got destroyed by the rivers and streams and one thing and another on the way to Georgia. Others say they are buried in this area. And till today, people still search for those rifles. There's a few rifles remaining that were made in the Tallassee Armory. Just a few feet from here is a spring that people drank from. And from that came the legend, if you ever drink water from this spring, you'll always try to come back to Tallassee. You can't get it out of your mind. You'll always try to come back. And so many visitors have come through here. And that spring still exists, but it's covered today. Maybe someday it'll be uncovered again, so that all who come by can drink from the spring that makes you return. The one thing that continues in time, and time brings on wars, World War I and the war effort, World War II, and the great national contribution from the mills in this area. Then there was the closing of the mill and the mill works. Now, let's look at the future and see what it holds. As you remember, I told you of the men who came here with their dreams. These men are here again, with those dreams again. Some 150 years after this mill was first started. Where will those dreams take us now? Hotels? Condominiums? Resorts? Manufacturing plants? Housing for the elderly? All of these things are limited only to the dreams of industrious men and women.